but he had been working with Toho through his association with Henry Saperstein at UPA, who was importing a lot of the Godzilla movies in the 60s and early 70s. So Mel Marin had brought Godzilla to Cinema Shares through his association with UPA, and Mel Marin didn't seem to think that there was a difference in that. He said, you know, we've got a Sonny Chiba karate movie, The Killing Machine, is in one of our TV packages here at Cinema Shares. Why can't we just put some of these Chinese movies on TV also?
He was the best. He killed the rest. The master killer, the master of the martial kung fu art. Revenge drove him on. Vengeance would be his. The Manchu warlords would pay for their crimes. See the master killer, the greatest artisan of kung fu. He is the best. The master killer, rated R from World Northall.
Marin left and took this deal with him. And he also made a deal for a few Golden Harvest movies. Beginning in the spring of 1979, World Northall, which was this independent company that up to that time had specialized in art films. One of their big hits was Cousin Cuisine, which had made millions. From the moment Mel Marin got there, they really became the exclusive distributor for the Shaw Brothers. And what would happen is the movies would come out and play in theaters, and then 6 months to a year later, they would go to television in these packages called Black Belt Theater.
And suddenly, kids across America were watching Shaw Brothers movies. They were making a 5-venom mask out of paper bags. They were playing, you know, 36 Chamber, a Master Killer, really, games. They were talking about Shaolin Temple.
The Black Belt Theater packages started selling in February of 1981. The first market was LA at K-Cop. And from there, it just spread out across the country. In New York, the movies were shown on Saturday afternoons under the banner Drive-In Movie. And they became so popular that after a while, they just ran 2 movies. It was the whole afternoon on Channel 5. They did so well that Black Belt Theater 1 and 2 grossed $6 million by the time the third one was being shown in international markets. You know, they kept building markets over the years. So by 1985, they were in 80 markets.
As that got bigger and more widespread, though, the movies in the packages were working through the Shaw library and working into the independent movies because everyone suddenly had to have a television package. And so a lot of the movies were getting cheaper. The dubbing wasn't quite always the best. The pan and scan sometimes looked a little crummy. They were working maybe from dupes of dupes down the line at smaller regional stations. And they were getting a reputation for being kind of cheap and kind of sloppy and kind of half-assed.
Most of these movies, at least the Shaw Brothers ones, were all widescreen. They're all shot in Shawscope. So they would have to be pan and scan for the TV ratio, and then they would mostly be cut for violence. And still, even after being cut for violence, they were incredibly violent. I remember watching Killer from Shantung, and the whole last 20 minutes of that movie, it's just like people getting axed and fighting with hatchets hanging out of their stomachs. And it was the bloodiest thing still to this day that I've seen on commercial television.
And what happened as the 80s progressed is the product was beginning to be thought of as cheaper and cheaper. And there came a point, it was also violence. It was being edited for violence. There was a lot of outcries about violence on TV. That stuff was getting cut or changed. Parents were using it to push back against television stations, airing these violent martial arts movies.
A gentleman by the name of Larry Bensky was the TV editor on these World Northall Black Belt Theater packages. And he had started with Mel Marin at Cinema Shares in the late 70s. One of his first jobs at Cinema Shares was to cut Godzilla vs. Megalon down to 48 minutes. So it could be shown in a 1-hour time slot with inserts of, during the commercial breaks, of John Belushi in a Godzilla costume hosting the show.
And so you begin to have television stations for the late 80s thinking, why are we paying money for these packages of films that we sometimes step in it with, that we're showing at late night, when we could be showing, I don't know, selling this airtime to commercials.
And I reckon that it's okay. Sure, we just want to run our own business.
At this point, Shaw seemed to be reeling. He didn't seem interested in the movies anymore. His mistress, who later became his wife, Mona Fong, had come in and he put her in charge of production. She was very effective, but she always had her eye on the bottom line. But she would do sort of boneheaded things, like she alienated Chung Chang-hwa, the director of Five Fingers of Death, because she demanded that the art department cut its budget in half by cutting all their props and costumes in half. So Chung Chang-hwa came in one day, his 6-foot spheres were suddenly 3-foot spheres. His floor-length rows were suddenly knee-length rows. They were saving money on fabric, and Mona Fong insisted, be this way. He stormed out and wound up working for Golden Harvest. So, penny-wise, pound foolish, that was the Mona Fong way. Run Run Shaw was more and more hands-off. Mona Fong was more and more hands-on. And she had good taste. She really tried to bring in some independent directors, female directors, really take some chances as the 70s progressed, but they never paid off at the box office.
You know, there were some issues with Shaw Brothers right around that time, and the production was slowing down, and eventually it stopped.
In 1980, the same year Run Run Shaw took over at TVB, was the year that Cinema City formed. Cinema City was a production company that would go on to make some of the biggest hits in Hong Kong in the 80s. Contemporary action comedies that were aimed at the growing yuppie audience. As the 80s progressed, TVB started renting a lot of the sound stages at the Movie Town lot. They were shooting more and more indoors, whereas Shaw was trying to shoot more and more on location to seem more contemporary and with the times. Slowly, the Shaw side of Movie Town went dark, while the TVB side seemed to be running 24 hours. In 1980, when Shaw took over TVB, he inadvertently became his own worst enemy. Shaw had always believed in actor training programs. They discovered some of Shaw Brothers' biggest stars doing that. And now he doubled down on actor training at TVB. And instead of minting stars who would go on to work at Run Run Shaw's company, Shaw Brothers, making movies, he made stars who would go on to work with everyone but Shaw Brothers. People like Tony Leung, Chow Yun-fat. Everyone who would become big later started at TVB, and none of them dreamed of working for Shaw Brothers. In 1986, Shaw, after issuing a series of articles that said Shaw was stronger than ever even though production was down, they didn't need to make so many movies because their movies were hits, they pulled the plug on the movie production. Famously, and this is a rumor, who knows if it's true, but when they pulled their plug, Lau Kar-leung, one of their hit directors, was in mainland China making martial arts of Shaolin with Jet Li. Shaw pulled the plug on production so suddenly and precipitously that apparently the martial arts of Shaolin crew was left stranded in China with no money for tickets home. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But it makes a pretty good story of how quickly this happened and how suddenly Shaw made this decision.
And so for later packages, like the last one, Black Belt Theater 5, they went all the way back to One-Armed Swordsman to fill out that package. So they went from 80 markets to 4 within a couple of years. And that was pretty much the end of World Northall.
At the same time that was happening, a lot of cities were looking around and saying, why are the hearts of us? Why is the Loop in Chicago, the Combat Zone in Boston, Times Square in New York? Why have we turned over this potentially lucrative property tax base to theaters that are showing, porn basically, porn and violence? And so there began to be these big urban revitalization campaigns to clean up Times Square, to clean up the Combat Zone, to make this a more viable tax base for the city. And eventually these theaters are run out, and corporations like Disney and Viacom came in and took over, basically taking out minority-owned businesses to replace them with businesses that were largely white and employed mostly white people to provide more tax base for the city. As the grindhouses went, as the airtime for the martial arts packages on TV went, as the bootlegging increased, slowly the martial arts movie in America died. The same way that in Hong Kong, Shaw Brothers died.
Rest in peace. You'll carry on with the cause. I swear, you will.
In the fall of 1985, a bootleg company called SP Video surfaced in New York. No one really knew who was behind SP Video, but eventually it came out that SP Video was started by a 16-year-old Puerto Rican kid named Johnny Ray Gasca. He would go to different video stores and some of the less reputable video stores around the city that would rent out bootleg tapes. He would provide the tapes for them, and so he was making, like $400 a week. He was also working for Family Video, which was on the corner of 8th Avenue and 42nd Street. And once he started these SP Video bootlegs, they put up a display in Family Video, and they were selling these tapes for like $59 or $59.99 for a tape, which he was getting from various sources. I mean, some of them he taped off of Drive-In Movie. Others he got off of like WHT, which was Winnetka Home Theater. World North Hall had sold some of the Shaw Brothers movies to WHT. So Johnny Ray Gasca was getting them from WHT, from Showtime, from Drive-In Movie on Channel 5. Eventually, Johnny Ray was getting the tapes directly from World North Hall, from Larry Bensky's assistant, who just thought that these kids were martial arts fans. He didn't realize that there was bootlegging going on, and a diagram pole fighter was leaked from the World North Hall office. It had not been aired yet. This was an uncut copy of it under the World North Hall title of Invincible Pole Fighter. Someone from World North Hall happened to be walking by a video store, walking to work from Port Authority, and walked by and saw Invincible Pole Fighter in the window and said, "Hey, wait a minute." They were in the process of doing My Young Auntie at that point when this was discovered, and so the office was shut down, the editing suite was shut down, and the remaining films were all prepared for TV someplace else. The SP Video problem, I think that had a significant impact on the company.
Huh? I'm a rice grinder, so what on earth could I